So here we go. It comes down to Robbie Benson. I didn't think Robbie would have the energy to get a take. I thought he struggled through the whole of the extra time, but in fairness to him, he's brave. He's worked really hard in the game, and he steps up. The man who has been here before on Cup Final Day. He's discarded the head bandage. The man that Stephen O'Donnell wanted at his club. Robbie Benson to step forward. Robbie Benson to score. St. Pat's to win the cup. Pandemonium at the Aviva Stadium. And for St. Pat's, they are back at the top of the Cup Final tree.
They sure are. Des Curran on RTE with Pat Fenlon as Robbie Benson did the necessary. St. Pat's lifting the FAI Cup for the first time since 2014, just the fourth time in their history. Winners on penalties against Bohemians at the Aviva Stadium in front of 37,126 spectators. Through the gates, Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent with us. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Joe. How are things?
Yeah, very well. So dramatic conclusion. Probably a game that was in the slow cooker for a while and then eventually got going.
Yeah, I think you could probably apply that sentence to most of the FAI Cup finals at the Aviva in recent years. I think that's 9 out of 12 that have gone to extra time. And there's been some lively ones, but most of the lively episodes I recall are extra time. I don't have the stat in front of me, but even the stat like first half goals is very low. So,
and have you got some Malcolm Gladwell-esque theory for me here? This phenomenon?
I don't have some fancy theory here for you, but I think it's possibly more straightforward that it's just it's a big day. It's such a big day that it's even though I suppose some of the clubs would have played, Bows would have played European games and in the Aviva this summer. I think it's probably just the scale of the event is so different to probably what some of them are used to week that it tends to, no matter how progressively minded the teams might be, they just can be edgy and a bit sort of nervy. And as a result, you sort of end up with a slow burner, as you say. But as the game opens up, it gets a little bit more eventful. And honestly, that's so many of the finals at the stadium in recent years. And this one was no different. I always felt I had the opportunity to ignite. I know you probably had multiple screens going on yesterday, but the most frustrating thing about the second half for me yesterday was I felt like there was good passages, and then I felt like there was an injury stoppage every couple of minutes. There was someone going down every couple of minutes with various knocks. Like 3 players went off injured in the second half, and a couple of others were limping around the place. And it was very hard for the game to really hit into a rhythm. But in extra time, almost when everyone had exercised all their changes and their subs, it really flowed almost a bit more. And it was a lot more entertaining.
And we did see quality, more so than with the Chris Forrester goal. And he's been a name in Irish football, big name for a long time, young player, so much promise, and has an interesting backstory, struggled in England, has given brilliant interviews about those struggles. And I think he's probably enjoying this time in his career, Dan.
Yeah, and the thing is, he didn't struggle in England football-wise at all. It was life. It was life that he struggled with, and he has said that himself. I mean, he spoke last week to myself and Johnny on our podcast, and speaking about how he was playing over with Peterborough in League One. He was cruising through games by his own words, and he's not not a cocky fella by any means. He just knows his own ability, and it was actually quite easy from the football stuff. It was the other however many 100 hours of the week there was that he had issues with, and then eventually that did catch up with his football, and brief spell in Scotland came home. But even his first couple of years at home were quite underwhelming, and there was other things going on. And it's really only this year that he's probably got back to his old self. He's been nominated in the Player of the Year shortlist by his peers, the top 3 players in the country. And yeah, it was good. It was good to see Chris Forrester do something like that on the national stage. And that's what you want in those games. Like you want sort of those big moments. And yes, it always ends up in penalties, or it feels like it. It always ends up in penalties every other year. And maybe we haven't had too many great goals. And it would be nice in a way if that settled the game, that brilliant moment of skill. But yeah, that's what you want. The one thing about the game yesterday, right? It wasn't good really for the 90 minutes, certainly. But it wasn't like teams were sort of hoofing it or something. They were trying to play. They just couldn't really just, as I said, find the flow. And there was a lot of, I posted this out at one point and I wrote about it, that at the 90-minute mark, like 12 out of the 22 players on the pitch were 23 or under. Like it's a young man's league at the moment. And Forrester is almost one of the senior citizens compared to, and he's about 28, 29. It feels like he's around forever. And I think maybe that sort of youthful profile, that was part of players maybe finding their way and not necessarily enjoying it as much as they might have.
For Stephen O'Donnell, brilliant player, obviously at Dundalk in particular, where he, copper fastened his reputation. This marks a very good season as manager, second in the league, European football, regardless of what happened yesterday, and now FAI Cup won to add to that general sense of promise about his managerial career. And already, I mean, just what St. Pat's fans don't want, already linked to the Dundalk position. And you write in the Irish Independent, for instance, today that he's pretty much top of their list, or they're certainly very interested in checking in with Stephen O'Donnell about his intentions. Now, in his post-match press conference yesterday, he was asked about his future at St. Pat's. Have a listen.
I will see that we'll get all that sort of decided over the next week or two. So we'll see what happens there. Today I'm buzzing to be winning with these group of lads, with the staff we have. Delighted, and it's been a journey, in a sort of abnormal journey in regard to COVID. It's the sort of difficulties we had. I missed a game a couple of weeks ago. We had a couple of other lads get COVID. So to dodge all them bullets and that, and then end up November the 28th at the Aviva, 37,000 on the right side of winning the FAI Cup, just buzzing.
Now, you did a great interview with him yesterday in the Sunday Independent. Did he tell you off the record he's going to Dundalk?
No, Joe, behave yourself. Like, I mean, I think this link really shouldn't be surprising to people, because, as you mentioned, he's like so synonymous with a period of success at Dundalk. That's where his career was reborn. And I think probably the expectation that he wouldn't be a contender for the Dundalk job is coming from this sort of belief that Dundalk, after a very turbulent period, as has been well documented, are going to like cut back dramatically, and it's going to be a real tough rebuilding job and stuff, and really dramatically scaling back. And while there is an element of truth in the fact that there will be cutbacks because their budget was unbelievably massive, like over the top inflated, they're still going to have a very competitive budget and be a strong club next year. And I think the people there, the new ownership there, are pretty ambitious in terms of their direction. The company, Stat Sports, are a hugely successful company. So the Dundalk are going to be in a good place going forward. So maybe people thought they wouldn't be able to go after a candidate like Stephen O'Donnell, who, as you mentioned, is doing great with St. Pat's, who are, qualified for Europe. And yeah, he's building something there. But of course, Dundalk, if they have the means to be competitive enough and challenging next year, they're going to go after someone who has an emotional attachment to the club. Yeah. And of course, when that person isn't tied down to a long-term contract, even more so, you will go and do that. And that's obviously the problem that St. Pat's have. And Lee Desmond, who was very good yesterday, spoke about it yesterday, that quite a number of their players are out of contract, and as you said, the manager isn't tied down to a long-term deal. So, of course, other people are going to ask questions, and of course, the club that he has an attachment with are going to ask questions. So, we'll see what happens with that one. But I hear some kind of rumor he might be on OTB AM in the morning. I'm not sure if that's the case.
That is the case.
That is the case. So I'm sure he can fend that question off then. But it was noticeable, I think, to a lot. I think people are aware that the league season in the Dundalk finished 10 days ago. And they haven't announced anything yet, and there's a number of players out of contract who haven't made decisions yet. My understanding is they're waiting to see what happens from the management point of view, and I'm guessing they would be aware of who some of the contenders might be. So, I mean, like maybe the emotion of things happening over the last couple of days could change his mind and strengthen it. Not, I say change his mind is the wrong word, but could sort of remove the discussion about going anywhere else and just say, no, Pats, I'm very happy. We've had a great time. We've won something. Let's keep it going. But I shouldn't be surprised that the Dundalk are asking. Yeah.
We've about 4 minutes left here. So
okay.
Let's... I was going to ask you to what extent the Bohemians team is going to be chopped up now and players are going to leave. I don't quite have time for that. A bigger picture question, first of all, because I want to ask about the Irish 10 situation before we go. But for Irish football, 37,000, Aviva Stadium, This felt like a big event, a great day for Irish football, record-breaking really. You're going back to the 40s for a crowd like this. Why do you think this all bubbled up, and what do you think the league can do with that kind of interest?
Yeah, no, it's right. I think it's 1968 is the last one that size, but yeah, it's 39,000 maybe. But yeah,
right.
Like it is still. I mean, like Pats won the cup in 2014, and there was 17,000 people there against Derry. And while Bows brought a huge crowd yesterday, even Pats, I think, added a few numbers to their sort of quota, and quite a few numbers, I think. And I think it is reflective of the Dublin clubs getting their act together. I spoke about this a bit on Saturday on the show, that and I was writing about it last week, that I think Dublin clubs in particular, it's been a huge catchment area, but I think they've been a bit complacent maybe in terms of tapping into the communities around them. I mean, you probably know, you would have lived probably quite close to Pats for a number of years, and I would have as well, and you wouldn't necessarily see that visibility or awareness. You'd sort of broadly be aware that clubs are there. I think it would have been similar in Phibsborough and the surrounding areas around Bows, but I think clubs have just done more to tap into those maybe people who are renting and young people in the area who may not have some geographical affiliation, but they want to get involved with what's going on. And maybe it's about just sort of presenting a positive message. And I'd like to think there's other stuff. I like to think it's to do with the football, young players, various factors that are drawing people in. But I definitely think there is an enthusiasm at the moment. I think there's probably an element of the post-pandemic, go to live events, appreciate what you've missed. And maybe a good combination of factors came together. But I think the incentive should be there to the FAI that no matter who's in the final in coming years, this becomes the benchmark and not some kind of little aberration on the map. I think it needs to become the norm.
Make it a marquee day. Undercut, unfortunately, to an extent by the, 20, 30 odd, depending on estimates, quote-unquote supporters, carried out what's been labelled a pre-planned attack on the Irish Town House pub, where there were St. Pat's supporters gathering before the final. Minister for Sport, behaviour like this undermines the sporting event itself, is his quote. Bowes, Richie McCormick was onto them for off the ball. They've condemned the deplorable actions, they say, of a tiny minority, and they've promised to act once fans are identified. This was really disappointing. Like the 40,000 in the stadium would have looked at this with the same level of disgust and almost half bemusement at the stupidity as the rest of us who saw it on our phones. And I was saying in the news round, there's a certain irony that these supporters of an Irish club who would probably have things to say about us supporting English clubs over here are aspiring to behave like the very worst of English supporters. It's just an embarrassment.
Yeah, like it's a tough one. I'm sort of writing a piece on it in the moment, and you're trying to sort of like you have to get the balance right with this. Like you can't sort of bury your head in the sand and just say it's nothing. But at the same time, you also can't go over the top and be hysterical about it and start generalising the behaviour of large numbers of people on the basis of the actions of a very small number.
Yeah.
And like my sort of take, I mean, I did hear the lad speaking about this morning, and I tend to agree. Like some of this, yeah, it's an element that's attaching itself around sport, but it's also reflective to some degree of like society as well too. And look, we've seen this during the summer and in the last year in Dublin, people who open their eyes and see the world around them, you see sort of gangs of kids and people going around causing issues, and that's to do with social problems and issues and broader things that we have in our society. And yes, sometimes these football matches and these events, people can latch on around the sides of them and see it as an opportunity to cause some grief.
Like there's no guarantee these lads even went to the match.
Well, I mean, listen, I don't know, Joe. Like people would probably have pictures out there, and it would be surprising if there wasn't some affiliation in some way. But at the same time, like, it's just, from speaking to people I know who were inside the pub that happened, like they're talking about a small number of people. They're not saying this was like, you could use terms like sort of a riot or even some of the phrases today would make it sound like there was like two sets of fans or this big coordinated scrap, It was bad, right? Like you can't just say, this is all okay. It was bad, but at the same time, like there's a danger of sort of painting this image then that like the league is unsafe for families, or it's, this is a battleground, or this is like a nightmare. This is something that sometimes happens around big events. And I think what's important is like the clubs take a strong line against it, But also you have to recognise as well that like some of these clubs, like they do very important work in communities and in areas that have social problems. And sometimes if you label things in a very dramatic sense, it can have a counterproductive impact, you know, and don't let this be the story of the day, because I don't think it was for the people that were there. And I think some of the people that were most outraged by it weren't actually there and don't necessarily have a sense of perspective of where it sat in with the day. But that's not to downplay it and just try and shrug it off.
Okay.
You know, it was serious, but I think the response to it needs to be measured as well too.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much. Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent there.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This is News Talk.
It's time to turn Black Friday on its head, because Virgin Media's painting it red. Now you can get a free 43-inch 4K smart